Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. Time for an impromptu live stream. I was about to post a video updates. I was going to do a not daily video because I don't do them every day, but I was going to do my regular video, talk market updates, talk charts. We saw this little breakouts, and I thought, let's just do a quick live stream. So I'm going to do a quick live stream. Thanks for being here, guys. Remember to hit that like button for me. Let others know about this stream that's happening here. We'll take a look at the charts. I'm going to cover most of the big names. My goal is to keep this to about 30 minutes, so we will move quickly. But check this out. Bitcoin pulling back. Absolutely got extended in the very short term. So we'll take a look at some of these coins, some of these names, see what's going on here, see what's happening today, tomorrow. Let me back up a little bit here. So I'm going to talk the big picture. Obviously, we've been in a very trendless environment. I mean, if you zoom way out, I mean, we have these little pumps, but you can see for the most part in September, little leg up, pull back, little leg up, pull back. But, is this the start of something bigger, or is this just kind of the calm before the real big moves? In the last couple of times we've seen these moves, right? These big, quote unquote, big moves. You're talking $200 moves in an hour, $300 moves in an hour. And that's massive for us right now because the market's just been so quiet. Liquidity or volatility has really dried up. I mean, if you look at the moves that we were seeing back here, right? I mean, these were massive moves. These are massive swings where we're talking thousands of dollars over the course of a couple of weeks. Here, I mean, we're talking hundreds, right? We're talking tiny dollar percentage wise. But nonetheless, it's still good. It's still exciting to see, the big pumps here coming out of BTC and some of these other names. Most of the names lately have been just quick pumps. You're seeing Ripple. We saw Litecoin moving earlier. You saw Bitcoin Cash. We're going to dissect all of these charts here, but just to show you, they've been mostly these quick pumps and the pullbacks, and they've been nice little tradable pumps, tradable rallies that you can do quick flips into, and just catch a quick 4, 5, 10% even. Ripple has probably been the most tradable name lately. Very consistent, showing some good follow through on a lot of these. Let me go to the hourlies. You can see the rallies, the pullbacks. Nice, very constructive. Was really narrowing out today and then broke out. Hasn't seen a ton of follow through yet to the upside. So, but for the most part, it's just kind of been that. And then today, watching BTC here for the last couple of hours. And this is funny. I'll tell you guys a story here. So yesterday I saw this rally happening and it was bouncing right into this resistance level. Started to roll over and I thought, this is looking like it's going to do another bear flag. And it was breaking the trend here to the downside. And I went short, right? I was looking at this thinking that probably was the end of the bounce. I did a quick trade on the bounce up. I did the jokingly said the CNBC challenge. They posted a bearish tweet here right around 6,400 talking about there's more downside to go. I took the contrary trade there and I went long and then had this nice little pump yesterday and, saw it over 6,500. So I got out of the way, took a quick profit there. And then I was just kind of sitting tight waiting and it really looked like it was starting to roll over. And so I took a short entry on this one here. And then when it bounced a little bit, I added another short entry on Ethereum. And overnight, they just really didn't do a whole lot. They just sat tight. And the last couple of times we've seen these bear flags, the short, once it breaks a trend, really started to move pretty quickly to the downside. It didn't do that this time. And so this morning I saw it just kind of sitting tight, meandering. My stop hadn't been hit yet. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to go flat, close out the shorts. And so I ended up closing out both of the shorts for both ETH and BTC. And then we were just watching this thing get really tight here over the last few hours. And so here's the funny part, right? I was on the group, on the Slack chats with the group, and we were watching this, just getting real narrow. Some of the other names were pumping, and there was some quick trades to be had there. But BTC was just sitting tight, and it was like, this thing's going to go one way or the other. And it was just, nothing was happening here for a couple of hours. And so we jokingly said, somebody, hurry quick, Node, why don't you leave or step away from the computer so it'll pump? And I said, you know what, that's actually not a bad idea. I'm going to go get some lunch. I'm getting hungry anyway. I kid you not. I posted that message. I walked away from the computer. By the time I got to my car, I looked at my phone and all the alarms were going off, and BTC had just blown up. It was almost comical. And so it is what it is. This feels a little climactic. This feels like the blow off move after a lot of these alts have rallied. So I'm looking for at least a little bit of retracements, a little bit of a pullback to show up here on this move. You can see during this big move up on BTC, and that killed a lot of shorts, by the way. We did see some other coins moving strongly, but not as much as I would have expected, especially considering a lot of these had already been moving ahead of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin was just sitting pretty tight here for a few hours before it broke out, and we were already seeing names move out. Stellar Lumens was breaking out. Obviously, Bitcoin Cash and Ripple had already broken out, and some of these names were just kind of edging out, and Bitcoin was just sitting tight. And when this happened, I mean, this is a pretty substantial move for BTC. I mean, it was a over 3.5% move in basically 15, 20 minutes. And some of the other names didn't move as strongly as I would have expected on that size of a BTC move. So it leads me to believe maybe they're due for a little bit more of a pause. We've already seen a pretty good run. And so where do we go from here? I want to point out the big picture, right? We've bumped into resistance. We broke through that, obviously. We went straight to the next level here around that sub 6,800. 6,800 was really the resistance last weekend. If you guys remember, we had that attempt to break through and then just rolled over early this week. And here we are bouncing right back into that. And so now the question is, was that it? Was that the end of the move? Or is this the beginning of potentially something bigger where we're starting to approach this narrowing of the price range? And you can see here, let me adjust my lines. I'm gonna just focus on the very shorter term time frame here. You can see how narrow this is really starting to get. So watch this trend in the near term. Now this is the 4-hour chart, so this is absolutely a little bit more granular when you're looking at the bigger picture, but just keep an eye on this, right? You could start to see this price really coil up within this little price range. And this is a tiny price range compared, in the big picture. I know this is a big move for the day, but in the big picture, I mean, you're talking about a 5% range that's only going to get much more narrow in the coming days, in the week or so. And then, the other thing to notice is this big overhead trend line that is right here and approaching price. Let me draw that a little bit closer to the main bodies there. And you can see that overhead trend line right now is sitting right around 68.35. And, there's a lot of people looking at 6,800 as kind of that resistance level. And so we're seeing a little confluence of resistance showing up again. Now, on the positive, if it breaks through that, that will be good. That will be a first good early sign going out to the daily chart. You can see that'll start to take out this near term, a little bit steeper of a trend line. Then there's a more intermediate trend line that I think most people are watching, the bigger one. And that's this here. It's not as steep as the other one. So if it breaks through this first one, next level up, you're talking around 7,100 or so. And, CNBC said, hey, there's a trade to go up to 7K. I was like, no, we're doomed when they said that. I was almost tempted to go short. A good thing I didn't, because that would have caught me off guard with that little pump we saw. But something to keep an eye on here. So right now, price is just kind of consolidating, bouncing back and forth. This is a pretty good move right now, but we are approaching some resistance. Again, this was the resistance from last weekend, right around that 6,800. So near term, that's the level to be watching. And it's going to be curious to see how volume shows up at the end of the day. It's been pretty quiet for most of the day, but that was a pretty big move earlier today. So let's take a look at some of these other names. There was a few other names that I was watching that were setting up. Right now, I'm thinking this is due for a pullback on the BTC side. At best, maybe some sideways consolidation action, because it did get a little extended in the very short run. Look at the RSI on the 5-minute, or the 1 hour, excuse me. It's up there. 4-hour has room to go if it wants to continue higher. So, just a little bit mixed. It depends on which time frame you're generally looking at, if you're swing trading or if you're position trading. And yeah, that's a good point. There's the futures contracts that close tomorrow. A lot of people are saying that's a factor, right? There's a little bit of movement being driven by that, trying to either squeeze the shorts or, the longs are trying to profit there. And certainly we have seen the volatility going into those futures contracts close dates. So yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. I've been mostly short trading, and not short side trading. I mean, like quick trading in terms of shorter term time frames. And these are the type of moves that you got to take profits into if you're doing something like that and just wait for consolidation. Seeing a nice little bit of a flag pattern on the 5-minute, but selling into strength is always a little bit of a favorite tactic of mine, as you guys know. Let me go down the list here. So going to the coin market cap real quick, we've seen these big moves here in the last couple of hours. Ethereum up 5%, Bitcoin Cash having a very strong day, very strong couple of days. Litecoin moving strongly. We'll look at that. I mentioned that in my last video, setting up and seeing some follow through to the upside there. And a few other names moving very nicely here today. So mostly green across the board. So good to see that. Let's go down the list here. Looking at Ethereum. I go the USD charts first, and then I will certainly look at a few BTC pairs because some of those are starting to look interesting here. But looking at ETH here on the USD pair, just marching along. A lot of volume came in here right at the highs during that that little selling or that little blow off we saw here just a little bit ago. So keep an eye on that. It's going to be interesting to see if it can overcome that. That was some profit taking right into resistance here in and around that $230 zone or so. So that's really where we saw that pausing here near term. But hey, not too bad. It's ultimately going to take its lead from Bitcoin, in my opinion. It's just kind of tracking to that. So very nice, but it's also starting to tighten up here. You can see there's this rising trend line that's starting to create a little bit of support, but you're also starting to approach a little bit of downward resistance, and price is getting very narrow in this range. So that's going to really be the little zone to be keeping an eye on here over the next week or so, see how it acts as it approaches that tightening. Ultimately, though, upside for me, the target was right around that 260, 265. We haven't reached that yet, so it's going to be interesting to see if we get another leg up. That's really the target that I was looking for last week before that big pullback happened. So maybe we can get one more leg up and see it hit that level. Looking at ETH from a BTC perspective, you can see it's just kind of keeping par. You know, it has its couple of days of outperformance, and then this week was definitely underperforming it. But look at the big picture here. So until this turns, you got to remain cautious in the big picture. So on this chart, I have two lines, and they may be hard to see on the live stream. Let me take off the RSI real quick. I have the blue line here. That's my 10-period exponential moving average. It's one of my favorite moving averages that I use personally for, especially for the shorter term time frame trading. But that's the 10 EMA. And then you have another line, which is a longer exponential moving average, usually about double. So you can go with the 22 or a 26 or something. And the point is not so much do the price points touch the line as much as the slope of the line and if they're stacked inversely or not, right? And this is a very quick and easy way to tell you if something is trending higher or lower in the intermediate term or whatever time frame you're looking at. And so you can see here very clearly, right? The blue line was below the yellow line, meaning the shorter term momentum was more bearish than the intermediate term momentum. So clearly the trend was down. And lately you've been seeing the slope change a little bit on these lines, right? So the big decline stopped. You can see the shorter term moving average is just kind of starting to go sideways here. The more intermediate one is starting to go sideways there. And so it tells you that the trend is changing potentially, but you've not seen confirmation yet. You'll get confirmation, and it's very close, but you'll get some confirmation when you start to see the 10 EMA living above the more intermediate one. When they start to cross over, that's really going to start to signify, hey, maybe this trend has officially changed and a low has been established. Now, I think the low was put in. We saw that climactic selling action a couple of weeks back. ETH had some massive volume at the lows. Everyone was trying to go short here, and that was when ETH was like at 170, at 180 at that point. It was like, hey, the short game was done, and we saw that big sell-off. And since then, it's just kind of been climbing nicely. So it'll be interesting to see if that was the low. And so that's what I'm looking at here. But keep an eye on those moving averages. Once they start to cross over, you know, really start to signify a change in trend. And I'm looking at this same type of pattern for a lot of the alts, because as you guys know, the alts have just been hammered this summer. I mean, just since May, since topping in May, it has just been a bloody summer for all of the alts. ETH, you look at other names like, you know, Nano, you look at Cardano, and it's just been a rough summer, and they're starting to turn the corner here a little bit. So I'm paying attention to those type of patterns because you can see here, Nano is a good example, right? When the moving averages crossed over. Now they're starting to trend higher, right? You're getting that turning the corner. And a lot of people will often ask, hey, what are you looking at for long-term holds? Is it time to get back into the alts from a long-term perspective? And I hate to be, and it's not that I'm trying to be evasive, but my answer is always, at least recently, it's been, it kind of depends. And the reason I say that is because of the big holding pattern that Bitcoin is in. Now, I preface it with saying, I believe the lows in the alts are in versus BTC, but if Bitcoin breaks below that 6K level, I expect that the alts are going to get smacked again. And so it's really hard to say until BTC breaks out of that pattern, but you're starting to see this change, this big low starting to be put in over the last couple of months in some of these alts. And so it's just something to keep an eye on here versus BTC, right? On the USDT pair or US dollar pair or the euro pair or whatever fiat pair you're looking at, ultimately, it's going to be driven by Bitcoin. I mean, let's be honest, right? If Bitcoin starts to break down, even if the alts hold up well versus BTC, the fiat equivalents are going to take a smacking in. So just something to keep an eye on. Looking at Litecoin, though, I mentioned this in my last video. It's been consolidating here for the last month or so, a little bit over a month now, and really trying to establish a solid low putting in here. I'm really liking the volume patterns that you're seeing in Litecoin as well. You saw here last week some pretty good accumulation right off the lows, and then today seeing the break above this key resistance level. This has been resistance since mid-August. You can see we hit it there, pulled back, hit it there, pulled back, hit it there again last week, pulling back and finally breaking above today. So we'll see if it can close above that today. Don't want to see this reverse completely, but that's a good sign there. Litecoin may be done and maybe putting in a very strong low versus BTC. On the USD pair, Litecoin was looking pretty good today as well. So it had that nice little low. Let me go to, I'll do Coinbase on this guy here. And let me clear these guys for you. And so there was a couple of things that I was watching on this here. So I was looking at the shorter term time frames. I was doing this a couple of days ago on the 4-hour charts. And this is what I was looking at on Litecoin here. I was watching this rising trend, right? These higher lows being established over the last week or so, keeping an eye on that. We had been bouncing, we had this pullback, bouncing into resistance. And then if you zoom out here, there was a little bit of a downtrend that I was watching here, this kind of broader downtrend that was really starting to all line up. And so I was keeping an eye on this little $55, $56 zone, thinking, hey, this may hold. Took an aggressive entry there, saw a little bit of a bounce. When BTC started to roll over yesterday, unfortunately took some profits off of that. And so Litecoin pumped, but still looking good. Now, big picture, though, if it starts to really hold that breakout point versus BTC, I'm thinking Litecoin will have more to go to the upside over the coming weeks or so, right? The coming days and weeks. That's just looking really solid. A lot of good volume coming in here as it's breaking out of this trend. And so Litecoin's looking pretty interesting here, looking like it may be finally putting in a pretty good low. You saw a big double bottom pattern form here on this daily chart. So you can see that you had that first low in mid-August, and you had this most recent low here, September 12th. And you can see during that process, look at the RSI during that bottoming process, right? You had this low, you technically had a lower low, and RSI did not make a lower low, did not confirm that. And these are very nice lows to pay attention to because you see that it's just a big hammer, right? It's a big hammer reversal. It's a big wick. But what it does psychologically for traders is everyone's watching this most recent low back here, right around 49.32. And when this thing breaks below, it's a false breakdown, right? Everybody thinks, oh, we're breaking support, we're going lower, quickly reverses, and that was it. That was the low. And so that's really nice to see, especially when RSI confirms and starts to move higher. And so got to pay attention to those kind of patterns in the big picture. This is the daily chart, and it's kind of looking like Litecoin's going to follow through to the upside. So I personally wouldn't be chasing it here. I mean, that you guys ultimately can do whatever you want, but I personally wouldn't be chasing it per se. I think it needs a little bit of a pause. You can see the RSI in the 1 hours is up here. It's definitely extended. But hey, who's to say it can't keep going? We're seeing these kind of unexpected rallies in a lot of the other names, right? So going to BCH, for example, You can see that here over the last couple of days, had that big move off the low and just very surprising. Now, this has some news behind it as well, right? So there was the Bitmain IPO and some other things going on there, some listings on Gemini. And so that catapulted it a little bit more than I think most names have seen. But just big moves. And going back to the 1 hours, right? If you're able to catch them, I mean, obviously you can't watch the charts 24/7, but if you're able to catch these little bull flags on the 1 hour, you get that little pump higher. We had another one just recently, but it is important to note the RSI is starting to wane a little bit with each of these pumps, signifying that near term probably losing a little bit of steam. So just, that's why I'm always hesitant to chase these names that have had these big moves unless you can capture them in on a little bit of a dip, because then that kind of helps your risk reward a little bit better, right? If you can capture it near one of these little low consolidations, then you got a tight stop, as opposed to chasing the big green candles, which is a very common mistake that a lot of people make, is kind of just chasing that big green candle only to see it pull back and could have given you a better entry later. But Bitcoin Cash on the daily chart has plenty of technical room to go if it wants to. And I told some folks that yesterday when I saw this thing moving out. I said, hey, near term, it looks a little extended, but daily 4-hour chart has plenty of room to run. It's just now turning the corner technically, right? It just finally breaks above resistance, which was right around that 504, 505, finally cleared that, and on massive volume, by the way. So from that perspective, it has room to go, right? So I'm definitely not saying Bitcoin Cash is topped. I am saying in the very short run, the shorter term timeframes do look extended, but the daily chart may just be getting started. So got to keep an eye on it for sure. All right, let's take a look at XRP. Everyone's talking XRP. Was the big winner last week. Saw some pretty good moves here last week. So this is the daily chart. Let me clear some of this here real quick for you. I was keeping an eye on this one earlier. Last week when I had that big rally, I thought that was it. That's the top, at least for now. Best case scenario, we kind of just consolidate. So you can see we had this pullback almost exactly to that 10 EMA on the daily. I was actually watching the shorter term time frames here during that pullback here. This is the 4-hour chart. We were watching this pullback here, and I was looking for a low of 432, and I missed it by just just a smidge. And it bottomed out around 433 and gave you that nice little counter trend rally. But you can see since then, it's just kind of consolidating. Now, they do have the Swell conference coming up, and you're going to see a little bit of anticipation towards that. And so I don't expect this to just totally collapse before that. Now, remember last year, for those of you that were trading this last year, I mean, it's kind of interesting to note that last year going into the Swell conference, it was right around 25 cents as well before it had that little rally. And here it is. We started that rally at 25 cents this time. So I expect this will probably hold going into that and then roll over afterwards. That's similar to what happened last year. So that's something to keep an eye on here. In the very short run, though, it's definitely made for some nice trading, quick trading, because while it may not look like it, this little rally here, I mean, think about how big that is, right? That's a 25% rally in 4 hours, right? So if you can trade even part of that, that's not a bad trade in 4 hours, right? And so it's made for some good little trades to the upside when you get these little pumps. You get this pullback here today, really consolidating a little bit of a symmetrical pattern here, getting very narrow right before BTC breaks out, and now edging higher on some pretty decent volume too. Not monster volume like we've seen in the past. I think this one a little exhausted here, but still makes for some little quick trades if you're inclined to do that. So you can see here today on the BTC move went up as high as 6% off of that. So that's Ripple, big picture, just kind of holding tight right now. We'll see if it gives you one more leg going into Swell conference. And I don't remember the exact date of that. If you guys know, if you could post that in the comments. I know it's October something or other, but still holding up though, technically, right? I mean, it's holding the 10 EMA, it's holding the breakout point back here, so technically it's still holding up. All right, let me see here. Let me go through these comments. Thank you guys for being here. Remember to hit that like button. Let's go take a look at BTC here, because I know it's been moving nicely here. BTC, about time, right? About time, Bitcoin. So here's the 5-minute chart. Very, very close view, but you can see this little bit of a pause sitting here trying to rally up. I'm thinking you get another little push higher and then a retracement pullback at least. So see how it does here over the next couple of hours. Here we come, 20K. Well, I don't know about that yet. All right. Yeah, so Cardano, EOS, let's take a look at those. We'll do a couple of more here. I am going to try to keep this stream to a shorter time frame today. And the nice thing, too, that I want to keep rehashing is, the quarter ends here soon. Bitcoin is still relatively new, and certainly, last year was really the first year where we saw anywhere near those type of trading volumes and whatnot. But that being said, it does have a little seasonality to it, and historically the winter months have been favorable, or the Q4 months have been favorable. It's not winter for everybody. I know it's summer for some people, but has been favorable for the crypto space. So it'll be interesting to see if we get some of that again later this year. So we are entering October here next week, and Q4 is officially upon us right as this chart starts to really narrow out. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it does by the end of October. Will it break higher? Will it break lower? I don't, it's anyone's guess. Let's be honest. It's anyone's guess which way this is going to go. But if you look at the sentiment that's out there, everyone's bearish, right? I mean, it's almost like common knowledge that, hey, this thing's going to break the line and we're going to drop to 4K or 5K. That's a very common assessment. And, and it's not without grounds. I mean, this is certainly trending lower lows and lower highs, but this line hasn't broken yet. So that's going to be interesting to see if the sentiment is just overly bearish. Everyone's expecting a break. Everyone's watching this lower line, and we end up breaking higher. Personally, what I would like to see, and I know this doesn't sound encouraging, but I would personally like to see this break lower and it to be kind of like a fake breakout or fake breakdown, if you will, and just kind of scare everybody, and then break higher, break above this line, and then that'll establish the low. That'll be the low that we can go move forward from. So this is kind of the scenario that I'm looking for. I'm looking for more of a, hey, we're going to snap, break below the line. Everyone's going to panic. You're going to trap some bears, and then we're going to reverse. And so that's my preference. I personally would rather see that than a break higher, because then it's going to be one of those, is this real? Are we going to break higher, or is this going to just collapse on us? To me, I would just love to see a washout, shakeout, everyone panics, and then just quickly snaps back and goes long. That's much more bullish in my scenario, so in my opinion. But hey, at the end of the day, right, it's anyone's guess. We're not, or I'm not. You might be. I'm not a whale, and I can't just drop 10,000 BTC on the market and move it in any one direction. So one day at a time, as I like to say, we'll take it one day at a time. All right, looking at Cardano, let's take a look at that one, and we'll start moving through some of these names here quickly. So Cardano, I'm going to hide the volume here. Or actually, no, I'm not, because the volume looks really good here. Here's what I'm going to do. Let me just move the volume on its own line so it doesn't. Hold on here. Why does this look different today? I just want to move this. Come on. Here we go. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay. I'm messing this up, see. Where's my little arrows? There was the move up, move down. Where'd that go? Did they change this? I swear I use this. I use this tool like a million times today. All right, anyway, let's just do this here real quick. We got volume there anyway. I don't want to keep this held up for that. But looking at Cardano, right, it's putting in a nice higher low. And this is the daily charts, right? And a lot of these alts are starting to do this, which is looking really good. So you had a little double bottom there, maybe hard to see, but you've got that double bottom here a couple of weeks ago here. So the first one on September 12th, and the second one just last week. Big rally, and then you had the pullback. And so far, a lot of these alts are doing this, where they're giving you a higher low on that daily charts. Still looking pretty good here. If it breaks above this resistance, still hasn't confirmed, right? But it's certainly looking positive on the USD pair. So breaking above that, let's call it, basically 9 cents, right? That's going to be a good break above resistance. And from there, you could really start to see some acceleration. You've seen a lot of these where when they finally clear, they do have that little pop to the upside. And so Cardano's looking pretty good there. Looking at EOS dollar. Now this one's pretty interesting here. A little bit of a symmetrical pattern, right? It's definitely making a higher low pattern here, but still wedging in this bigger picture on the daily. And so, I mean, technically, if you want to be technical, this is a little bit of a bear flag right off the lows, but this is a good bottoming pattern, right? You're getting these higher lows, still technically lower highs on the daily. You had the most recent high here in early September, and this is a much lower high, but you're getting higher lows. So just watch this here right now. In the near term, it was looking pretty good here on the setup earlier today. Finally broke above resistance with the rest of the market when it finally moved. It's a choppy one, but I was going to say this looks like a little bit like a cup and handle, right? You got this big dip and then had that little handle forming there, but nonetheless, right, the same resistance point to be watching, and finally broke out. So it's looking pretty good here, starting to edge its way higher. IOTA. I'm going to go to IOTA dollar on Bitfinex. Let me zoom out and go to that daily charts. This was the big mover a couple weeks back, remember? And it's always interesting to see how they rotate. Remember, one week it's IOTA, another week it's Ontology, and this week or last week it was Ripple, and this week it's been Bitcoin Cash, and you just get the different leaders that kind of move higher along with the market, but there's always one that's outperforming. Now, IOTA has just kind of been sitting tight for the most part this week, right? Just not a whole lot of action, very choppy range, but in the big picture, it did put that ultimate low. Many of these names did right around that middle August, or this is middle August, excuse me. So I put that higher low, still not confirming to the downside. So it's still looking pretty good, but it's just choppy, right? Not a whole lot of movement one way or the other. Not a lot of follow through in terms of that one. Looking at NEO was looking pretty good here earlier, but also very range bound. And you can just see if you zoom out, right? This market's just not trending. I mean, since middle August. Choppy. Now you get these very short-term trends. This is a 4-hour chart, right? So you get like a day or two of trend, but in the big picture, not a trending market. But you got to look at this as potentially bottoming formations, right? These kind of bottoms are being set, markets trying to turn the corner. Now we want to see some upside confirmation on a lot of these names, and ultimately it's going to come down to what BTC does here in the next month or so. All right, so we looked at, we did not look at lumens. Let's take a look at lumens. Lumens are looking stellar. So looking at the 1-hour chart here now, I posted this earlier in the group and I said, this, I'll be honest, this chart's not pretty, but it is holding this longer term rising trend line. And when I posted this, it was bumping up right against this overhead resistance in and around that 25 cents, 26 cents. And it's since starting to edge out, not a massive break higher, but it is edging out above that resistance. So that's looking good. And the fact that it's just kind of holding this broader rising trend line is good, but it's a very choppy chart. Did have that run last week in sympathy with Ripple or with XRP, but that's going to be your first resistance, right? Can you get above this little bit of a resistance here, this most recent high? So that's what I'm looking at. First test right here. You've got let me show you here. You've got a little confluence of support here that broke down, became resistance. And so I'd be looking for a test here. And if it can get above this, then a retest of this most recent high that we saw on Stellar. How's this look versus BTC? Look at that pair here in a little bit. So looking at the daily chart here, definitely had a solid breakout versus Bitcoin. Look at that. I hadn't even noticed that yet. So yeah, that's looking pretty good here. Got a little extended last week. You can see on the daily RSI was well above 70, but it's pulling back right to the breakout point. So that looks really good, actually. It's very common to see these throwbacks right to the breakout point. Broke that trend line, and that's holding, and that's also the 10 EMA on the daily. So pretty interesting to see that. All right, let's go back to BTC. Bitcoin is pumping. That's it. The bottom's in. 20,000, here we come. I'm joking, okay? I'm kidding. This is actually kind of nice to see. I won't say why, but I posted something in the group. So if you're listening, this is what I was looking for. We'll see. All right. Okay, guys, let's keep going. We'll do a couple of more, and then I will wrap this up. I just wanted to do a quick impromptu live stream instead of posting my normal video. NEM. Oh man, you know it's alt season when NEM starts pumping again. Looking at NEM, let me go to the 4-hour chart here. Definitely trying to put in a pretty good low here versus BTC. I mean, look how washed out that was middle September. So many names put that low in. We'll see if it can follow through to the upside, but it was moving pretty strongly earlier today. Still in this range, still choppy, but hey, higher lows are still very much in place. And with a lot of these names, if you want to take a look at those charts, that's what I'd be looking for, right? Just where are those lows? Does it create a trend of higher lows? You know, that's really things to be keeping an eye on. And as long as that holds, it's very positive. And what you want to see next is that acceleration to the upside. But hey, NEM. All right. Nano. Man, Nano just never really recovered. I was watching this. So Nano, remember Nano had that big run at the beginning of this month. It was just kind of, how big was it? That was like 70% or something. It was a huge run. Yeah, 64%, right? And then it had this pullback, and I was looking at it right here. I was thinking, hey, this is going to be a nice little breakout. It was a bull flag. Follow through, see if we can get some more upside. And then BTC rolled over right here on this guy. And I got shook out. And I said, you know what? I hadn't hit my stop, but I said, I'm just going to go out of the way, because when you're trading, it's really hard to put stops in place on these guys, because you can only stop out into Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin's rolling over, well, then you got to do 2 trades. So it just makes it a little bit more challenging from that perspective. But this thing pulled back. I just decided to get out of the way, and then it had that big pump, and I thought, oh man, I got shook out. I sold out too early, and then look what happened. It just rolled right over and just hasn't really recovered since. So I don't feel too bad anymore. I was feeling sorry for myself up here, and it just kind of rolled over, and so it is what it is. But right now, that's what I'd be watching. Now, it's kind of interesting to see that it's on the other side of this line. It broke above, and it's just kind of been living. Finally turning the corner here, so we'll see. But until it breaks out of this pattern, for me, nothing to do with this guy yet. When you're trading, how much profit is in your mind? I'm not sure what the question is there, but I'll put it in a different way, right? When I'm trading, I have a minimum of 2R, meaning my risk-reward ratio is 2 at least. And so what that means is, depending on where I get in, my stop loss, let's say my stop loss is 3%, then minimum I'm looking to make 6% on the upside, right? And so that's how I would look at that. And so when I'm trading, I will position size accordingly, right? So I have some predetermined maximum risk that I will put on any trade, and I will adjust my position size depending on how wide my stop is. So if I got a 5% stop loss versus a 10% stop loss, then the 10% stop loss, that position is going to be much smaller than the 5%. So I hope that makes sense. I know it's kind of hard to explain without kind of looking at it, but that's how I approach those. Double top, maybe. All right, we'll see. Let me do a couple more here. Let me scroll through some of these comments. I did Lumens, we did Cardano, we did Nano, we did Neo, we did NEM. We even did NEM. Tron, let's take a look at Tron. Tron, now this almost looks like the BTC chart, just on a smaller scale. I didn't have quite as big of a move, but right now that's the level to be watching to see if we can break out. Now, personally, this is just me, and I hope I'm wrong, but personally, I think that little move we saw in BTC, at least in the near term, was a little bit exhaustive, and we're seeing a second run higher, and I'm thinking that's a little bit of a double top in the short run, and hopefully we see a little bit of a retracement pullback, and then we'll go from there. If that happens, I'm thinking a lot of these alts will do something very similar, where you're going to see a little bit of a, and this is short term. This is a 5-minute chart, by the way. So, you know, like, is that going to be a double top? Do we break down from there? That's something to keep an eye on here. Now, right now, it's just kind of wedging up, but if it starts to break below that trend line, then I'd be looking to just step aside personally. Now, they're a little extended on the hourly, so what you want to see, you know, the best scenario would just kind of be a little flag up at this level, would let things cool off a little bit and set up another leg. If you look at the 1 hour, look at the RSIs up here near 74. If you look at the 4 hour, has room to run on the 4 hour, and so could keep going from that perspective. But that's just how I dissect it, right? When I'm looking for an entry, I always look at the shorter term time frames, and I'm thinking, is it too extended on the short term time frames? If the answer is yes, then I may just wait for a little bit of a dip, because I'd rather getting a little bit lower just helps me with the tighter stop and all that fun stuff. So just something to keep an eye on. But it just depends on the strategy. If you're swing trading and all that, you probably don't care as much. You know, you're just looking for an entry with a wider stop anyway. But I'm looking for tighter stops generally. All right, so we did EOS, Icon. We have not done Icon. Let's take a look at that guy here. So looking at Icon, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit on this daily. I've got this line drawn because it was looking really nice a few days ago. And this is what I was looking at here. I was looking at that, and it looked like it was about to break out. Strong volume came in on that candle, by the way. And then just not a lot of follow through, pulled right back. Now, some of that was market forces because BTC rolled over as well. But it's holding up pretty good, and it's making a little bit of a higher low here now. So trying to recapture that resistance level. So we'll see if we can get above that, but not looking too bad here. Versus BTC, another name I think is finally putting in a low. You can see I've already been watching this. I got this highlighted. Let me extend that out a little bit more. It needs to clear this downtrend, right? It's still not there. Technically, you can say, hey, this is a descending triangle, which is bearish, but until this low is broken, got to give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm thinking a low may be in versus this guy. RSI is also looking positive. You're seeing that bullish divergence showing up, a little bit of momentum, but it's not confirmed yet. So that's the other thing to keep an eye on, right? I want to see this thing start to break higher now, but I think it's putting in a pretty good low versus BTC. 0x Coinbase. Man, you know, it's been such a news-driven couple of weeks. You've got, I mean, just all over the place. A lot of news. Last week, SEC, which no surprise there. Coinbase and announcements of announcements and hiring sprees, and just the crypto space is still very, very vibrant. The infrastructure is being built. There's, you know, progress being made on a lot of projects. I know that the prices don't always reflect that, and you know, and I'm a big believer long term, and I think we'll get there again, guys. Now, will all of these names come back? Absolutely not. You guys know where I stand on that. There's going to be some names that just kind of never see the heydays again, right? They probably will never see their prior highs again, but I don't believe that's going to be the case for a lot of the big names and a lot of the big projects, right? Especially Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin will see its highs again, but not all of the names will. But looking at 0x, this is one I do like. I do like this one long term. As you guys know, it's kind of on deck for potentially being added to Coinbase, putting at a little bit of a low here. And you can see this most recent downtrend that's been in place on this daily chart is finally being taken out. So, right, you're starting to see this thing turn the corner there a little bit. And so that looks really good. 0x versus BTC, starting to see a little bit more momentum come back in, some excitement. It is testing some near-term resistance here. You can see there's that's where it's pausing here just in the very short run. So something to keep an eye on. But I'm liking it. I'm liking 0x here. Coinbase. All right, let's do, let me see. I'm going to do two more, and then we will go ahead and wrap this up. So let's go back to Bitcoin real quick, and then I'll pick the other two here shortly. But there's a good question here. Where's Bitcoin's ceiling on this current run-up? And these are the levels that I'm watching here in this current run-up. I'm watching this intermediate shorter-term trend. Whoops, let me clear that. So I've got two lines on here. Let me change the color on this so it makes it a little easier to talk to. So this yellow line, this top line here, right, it's a steeper trend line. So it's definitely not going to be as meaningful as kind of the bigger trend line, but this is certainly something to watch. And so that's what I'm watching right now, is this most recent trend line, which is right below 6,900. There's also the horizontal price resistance, which was the high of last week, and that's right around here. And you can see that it lines up pretty well with that trend line. And so that's really the first target potential ceiling that I'm looking at. Now, from a technical perspective, I mean, look at the RSI on the daily chart. All right, if this thing wants to continue higher, it absolutely has room to go to the upside if it wants to go higher here. But that's what I'm looking at near term. I'm thinking that's where you may see the pause going into the zone, or even today, that may be it. You put in a lower top, and then on a pullback, I'm watching this lower trend line. Now, if it continues very strongly, then I'm looking at, psychological 7K is kind of the next level. And then, of course, this big trend up here. I don't expect it to get that high. If it does, that'll really get interesting, because that's going to be right here at these levels, retesting this trend line. But right now, that's not really my expectation in the near term. The weekend is coming. Dump it. I kind of agree with you. The last couple of weekends have just been this no trade environment, just kind of choppy. And then the dump on Monday. So, we'll see. All right, I'm going to do two more, and then we will wrap this one up. Let me see here. I'm not going to do two that I picked already. We did EOS already. We did. Yeah, I noticed that the shorts went up with this last pump. I was looking. Sorry, I keep distracting myself by reading all the comments. So, but I like the comments. So I was looking at the short interest just to see if it had spiked during this big run up or collapsed as a short squeeze, and it didn't. Right, so this was not like a massive short squeeze. In fact, they were bouncing a little bit as the Bitcoin price rallied. So something interesting to see here. But okay. Let me do we did IOTA. Let's do basic attention, and we will do after that ontology. So we'll do those two. All right, so looking at the bats, I'm going to do this on the BTC pair first, and then I'll do the dollar pair. So let me clear my all my markups here, but you can see it's just been vacillating back and forth around this center line here on my chart. And that's really the thing to pay attention to. It's kind of building this symmetrical pattern here at the lows. But like many of the other names we saw, right, this rising lower trend line, and that's really going to be the pattern to keep an eye on, right? If it makes a lower high here and then starts to break below and makes a new lower low, that's just not going to be as positive, right? It's not going to look like the momentum's continuing. And right now, this resistance level on the BTC pair is really the level to be watching, right? If it can start to get above that, that's going to start to look like a pretty decent breakout. And this is the 4-hour chart, by the way. So that's what I'm looking at on BATS right now. It's definitely looking like it's putting in a pretty decent low versus BTC. Now we want to see some upside confirmation. All right, and one more ontology. So looking at ontology here, this is ontology versus BTC. And, this was the big winner a week and a half ago or whatever it was, and just kind of sitting tight right now. But not looking too bad. I mean, it's not participating as much with some of these recent pumps that we're seeing, but I'm also seeing some of these names take turns, right? You kind of get into the rotation where you get these quick moves higher and then the next name moves. So definitely want to keep an eye on here, right? This is really the near-term, very short-term resistance level to be watching right around that 2,900 Satoshi level. So if it can get above that, then maybe it's turn. And then above that, the resistance that I'd be watching, the first level, is going to be right here, which is not very far ahead. So it'd be nice if it just blasts through both of those. It's only 3% above. And then above that, most likely the recent highs. So that's the level to be looking at on ontology, looking at it from the dollar tether pair. It is edging higher. Of course, that's a little bit on BTC. It's holding par with Bitcoin, so that's why it's moving higher with Bitcoin. So very similar action, though, right above resistance. Next level is right here around that $2 mark on ontology. All right. Well, we did Ripple. We did Cardano. What do I think about Kraken adding Cardano and Quantum? I think that's been priced in already. You saw that quick pump in some of those names. The thing with Kraken, other than the big names like, ETH and Bitcoin and Ripple, like most of the other names on there, the liquidity is just so low. It's just not conducive to trading. So hopefully them adding more names will help with some of that. But right now, it's just from a liquidity perspective, it's really tough on Kraken. And so not my favorite from that perspective, other than the big names, right? The big names, especially because they offer margin trading and all that. That's good for those names. And I doubt they're going to do margin trading on Cardano and Quantum. Right now, they only offer it for a handful of names as it is. Yeah, and yeah, when they stopped when they shut down last year, that really turned a lot of people away from it. So I know a lot of people just are not going to come back, or for a long time they won't because of that. So can't blame them. So looking at Quantum, you can see it had that big push. It's already been priced in personally, I think. Now it could still rally on its own merit, but I don't think it's going to be purely because of Kraken news per se. But this one's looking pretty good here too, anyway. So, all right, guys. Well, that's going to be it for today. Hey, how's it going, man? One broker has been seized by the FBI. Wow. That's seen more of that too. Oh, no sound. No sound. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being here. Tomorrow is Friday. Sometimes some people already have Friday on their schedule. It's already Friday there, wherever you may be. But happy trading. Have a great weekend. We'll see where these markets go over the next day or so. But thanks for being here. Thanks for the likes. Till next time, take care, everyone.